unknown world, full of spirituality and mysticism, where people live in harmony and symbiosis with nature, cut off from the rest of humanity. In the early 16th century, when the first Spanish ships set sail for a new, undiscovered world, it soon became clear that this world was about to change forever. They tried with all their might to impose their way of life on this world, but what remained was only a feast for the vultures. The first encounter between the natives of the so-called New World and the conquistadors took place on October 12, 1492. That fateful day ushered in an era of unprecedented violence and destruction that would last for hundreds of years. In 1519, a man named Hernán Cortés landed in a place now known as Mexico. The downfall of the Aztec Empire was sealed. Over the next few years, a path of violence runs through this world, and of the many former inhabitants of this new wondrous world, only a pale memory remains. But almost 27 years later, the Spaniards meet their greatest adversaries for the first time, the proud Mapuche people. The attempts of the conquistadors to establish a settlement in their territory were successfully prevented by the Mapuche for several years. Only 4 years later, they succeeded in founding the first city. This city became known as Concepcion. But this success did not last long. In the next few years, a fierce battle broke out, which turned into a war that lasted more than 100 years, known today as the Araucanian War. In the next few years, however, the Mapuche managed to destroy several bases as well as the city of Concepcion, thus pushing back the conquistadors. In 1557, a man named Garcia Hurtado de Mendoza undertook a new campaign to the south. In the process, he will meet the man whose myth will last for centuries, Galvarino. The legend of Galvarino served especially the Mapuche as inspiration, symbolizing their demonstrable courage and tenacity when it came to defending their rights and their lands. The first encounter between the Mapuche and Mendoza took place on November 8, 1557, in the so-called Battle of Lagunillas. In anticipation of the upcoming invasion of their territory, the Mapuche organized their defense by gathering their forces in 3 places to be able to execute an ambush from several sides. From the camp of the conquistadors, 2 soldiers went to collect fruit in the nearby forests, but they discovered a large group of Mapuche. One of them was killed, but the other managed to escape and bring news of the enemy's proximity to the camp. Warned of the impending danger, Mendoza quickly organized his army for battle. Although outnumbered, the Spanish arquebusiers and artillery repulsed the Mapuche attacks. The battle turned out to be devastating for the Mapuche. 300 Mapuche were killed, and 150 were captured. Among those captured was Galvarino. Galvarino and the other captured Mapuche were tied up and escorted to the Spanish camp. Once back at the Spanish camp, they did not take long to execute a gruesome punishment on the Mapuche for their actions. Garcia Hurtado de Mendoza ordered the amputation of each Mapuche's right hand and nose. For the Mapuche leaders, as well as for Galvarino, Mendoza imposed an even more horrific punishment, the amputation of both hands. As Galvarino faced his fate, the fighting spirit still flamed in his eyes. Unimpressed by the amputation of his right hand, he placed his left hand on the cutting board. Cruelly maltreated and mutilated, the Mapuche were sent back to their people, under the assumption that this would intimidate the rest of the Mapuche. Once back in the village, the returned warriors reported the atrocities they had experienced, but instead of admitting defeat, Galvarino makes use of his experiences. He succeeds in convincing his people that it is inevitable that all Spaniards who ever set foot on Mapuche land must die. Inspired by Galvarino's devotion, just a few days later, on November 30th, 1557, the largest Mapuche army ever assembled, marched against the Spanish conquistadors. Galvarino was one of them. In order to participate in this battle, Galvarino did the unthinkable. He transformed himself into a fearsome creature, with long blades in the place where his hands once were, tied with ropes to his still-injured stumps. This fateful moment was the birth of a legend that still serves as an inspiration to people all over the world. The legend of Galvarino. The Mapuche plan was to sneak up on the camp of the unprepared Spaniards and take them by surprise. Unfortunately for the Mapuche, an early morning trumpet call from the Spaniards was misinterpreted by the Mapuche and led to some Mapuche units attacking too early, assuming they had already been discovered. What followed was a devastating battle that cost thousands and thousands of lives. The Mapuche were crushed by the Spanish conquistadors, despite being outnumbered. Hundreds of Mapuche were captured by the Spanish. Among the prisoners was also Galvarino. Instead of mutilating the Mapuche once again, the Spanish decided to execute all Mapuche captured in the battle. What exactly happened to Galvarino is still not clear. Some claim that he was thrown to the dogs. Others claim that Galvarino was hanged on the gallows. Still others claim that he took his own life before the Spanish could take it from him. Regardless of how Galvarino lost his life, his spirit and his unbroken will live eternally in the hearts of the proud Mapuche people, as well as in all others who fight against all forms of injustice.